I want you to close your eyes for a second. It is July 14th, 1944.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah. You are First Lieutenant Evald Swanson. You're sitting in the pilot seat of a B-17 Flying Fortress, and you are cruising at 30,000 feet.
Right up where the air is incredibly thin.
Exactly. The engines are deafening. The vibration is just rattling your teeth. But you're in the rhythm, you know. You're doing your job. And then you look forward.
And this is where it gets crazy.
Right, where there used to be a dashboard, flight instruments, a windshield, a floor. There's literally nothing.
Just nothing.
Just open blue sky and a 300-mile-per-hour wind blasting you right in the face.
At 40 degrees below zero, let's not forget. I mean, it's the stuff of nightmares. In aviation, that is usually the final frame of the movie.
Because that kind of structural failure just isn't survivable.
No, you don't fly a plane in that condition. You fall in it. But in the case we're looking at today, that exact moment looking out into the absolute void where the front of your plane used to be, that wasn't the end.
No, it wasn't. It was the start of one of the most insane engineering improvisations in history. So today we are doing a deep dive into the source material surrounding the Mispa.
Or Mispa, depending on the historical record, but yeah. A B-17G from the 483rd Bomb Group.
Right. And we have this incredibly detailed account of a mission that, by all the laws of physics, should have ended in a spiral dive immediately, but it didn't.
And should have is really the key phrase there. We aren't just talking about a damaged plane today. We're talking about a machine that had its entire central nervous system severed.
Yeah.
Physics said down, aerodynamics said spin, and this crew just utterly refused to listen.
So let's get into it. Set the scene for us a bit more.
Yeah.
Where are they going, and why is this mission so dangerous even before the nose gets completely blown off?
So the target is the Shell oil refinery and railway yards in Budapest, and this is high-stakes stuff.
Because of the fuel.
Exactly. By July of 44, the 15th Air Force is just hammering these strategic targets to cut off fuel to the German war machine. But the Luftwaffe knows this.
Right, they're not stupid.
They're waiting. They have positioned over 288mm flak guns around those rail yards.
200. That just seems, that's excessive.
It was a literal wall of steel, and you got to remember the grim math of the 15th Air Force at this specific time. The statistics in our sources are genuinely chilling.
The casualty rates.
Yeah. For every 10 men who climbed into a B-17, 8 would not return.
Wow. 8 out of 10.
Might not return. Statistically, they would not. You were flying into an absolute meat grinder.
And so the Mispa is right in the middle of this. They're in a 60-aircraft formation. It's 9:42 a.m. They're right over the target.
Right on the bomb run. The bombardier, who is Second Lieutenant Kenneth Dudley, he releases the payload.
Okay.
2 tons of high explosives.
And the plane does that characteristic lurch upward, right?
Yeah.
And the weight drops.
Yeah, you feel that lift, and almost instantly, bam! An 88mm shell scores a direct hit on the nose of the aircraft.
But when we say a hit on the nose, we aren't talking about a hole in the side of the fuselage.
No. We are talking about complete vaporization.
Mm.
The source material is very specific about this. Everything forward of the pilot's windshield just ceased to exist.
Just gone.
Gone. The B-17G has that really distinctive chin turret underneath the nose gone, the plexiglass cone gone, the bombardier station, the navigator's desk, the Norden bomb site, all of it blown into dust in a fraction of a second.
Which means the men inside that sector.
Yeah, and that's the heavy part of this story. Second Lieutenant Dudley, the bombardier, and Second Lieutenant Joe Henderson, the navigator, they were killed instantly.
They didn't even have a chance.
None at all. They were there 1 second, guiding the plane over the target, and just gone the next.
That is just terrifying. So Swanson, the pilot, is sitting there. He's probably covered in debris, maybe blood. The wind is screaming at him. But he's the pilot, right? So his first instinct is to grab the yoke and stabilize the plane.
Right, and that is exactly where the real panic sets in, because he reaches out to grab the wheel and there's nothing there to grab.
Wait, write that down for us. The yoke isn't attached to the floor.
Not in a B-17, no. In this aircraft, the instrument panel and the mounting for the control column, the actual steering wheel, they're attached to the forward fuselage structure.
The structure that just got vaporized.
Exactly. When the nose blew off, it took the entire dashboard and the primary flight controls with it. Swanson is sitting in his seat, literally holding air.
So he has no airspeed indicator, no altimeter, no artificial horizon.
0 instruments. He has absolutely no idea how fast he's going. He doesn't know his exact altitude, and he has no steering wheel. But it actually gets worse.
How does it get worse than having no steering wheel?
Think about a seesaw. You just removed thousands of pounds of aluminum, heavy equipment, and 2 grown men from the very front of the seesaw.
Oh, wow. the center of gravity.
It shifts drastically. The plane is now massively, impossibly tail-heavy, so the nose pitches up violently.
Because all the weight is in the back now.
Right. They are going into a near-vertical climb, which in a heavy bomber leads directly to a stall, which leads to a death spiral. Swanson is staring straight up at the sky. The plane is trying to flip over backward, and he has absolutely no physical way to push the nose down.
This just sounds completely hopeless. I mean, if you can't steer and the physics of the plane are forcing you into an unrecoverable stall, you just bail out, right?
You'd think so. That's standard procedure. But Swanson somehow manages to keep the wings somewhat level just by sensing the movement of the seat under him, maybe feathering the throttles a bit, but he desperately needs elevator control to get that nose down.
And this is where the crazy improvised solution comes in.
This is where the miracle happens. The flight engineer, Technical Sergeant Frank Demenzi, and some of the other crew members in the back, guys named Semeli and Bell, they spot something in the bomb bay.
What could they possibly find in the bomb bay that's going to help them steer a plane?
It's the bare anatomy of the aircraft. See, the B-17 is a purely mechanical beast. It's not flown by computers or fancy hydraulics like a modern jet.
Right, it's analog.
Very analog. It's flown by steel cables about 3/8 an inch thick that physically connect the pilot's hands and feet to the rudder and the elevators in the tail section.
And those run through the bomb bay.
Usually they are neatly hidden behind aluminum panels in the ceiling of the bomb bay. You'd never see them.
But the explosion.
The explosion and the massive wind blast from the missing nose just ripped those protective panels away. The literal nervous system of the plane was suddenly exposed.
So you just have these bare steel wires hanging down.
Hanging right there in the open. And Demenzi and the crew, they look at these wires and they realize those are the elevator cables. Those are the rudder cables.
Oh, my God.
They realize if the pilot can't pull them from the front of the plane, we have to pull them from the middle.
No way. They were going to fly a 30-ton bomber by physically pulling on strings.
That is exactly what they decided to do. They became a human autopilot.
I just want you to imagine the physical reality of this for a second. You are standing on a narrow catwalk over the bomb bay doors. The front of the plane is wide open, so the whole fuselage is basically wind tunnel.
It's 40 degrees below zero.
40 below zero. And you have to grab these freezing taut steel cables, wrap them around your gloved hands, and just heave on them with all your body weight.
And here's the kicker. How do they know which way to pull? They can't see out the front.
That's a great question, because they're 30 feet behind Swanson, right?
Exactly. And there's no intercom. The comm system was destroyed with the nose, so they are flying totally blind.
So how do they communicate?
They are just reacting to the physical sway of the floorboards. If the floor tilts to the left, they heave on the right rudder cable. If the floor feels like it's climbing too steeply, they pull the elevator cables to push the nose down.
That is unbelievable coordination, just feeling the plane and reacting. But Swanson still has the engine throttles up in the cockpit, right? Because those are usually on a center pedestal, not the dashboard.
Yes, the throttle quadrants somehow survived the blast, so Swanson is actively managing the engine power. And this is where he has to get really creative with something called differential power.
Okay, I've heard that term in aviation, but break it down for us. How does that help him steer?
Think of it like being in a rowboat or a canoe. If you lose your rudder, how do you turn right?
You paddle way harder on the left side.
Exactly. Swanson is doing the exact same thing with 4 massive engines. If he feels the plane needs to turn right, he slams the throttles forward on the left wing engines. That extra thrust pushes the left side of the plane faster than the right, forcing the nose to swing over.
He is literally muscling this 30-ton machine through the sky.
He's rowing it through the air, and the guys in the back are wrestling the cables.
And the craziest part is it works.
For a few minutes, yeah, it works. They managed to level out, but the universe really wasn't done with them yet. Because 2 minutes after the nose gets vaporized.
Just 2 minutes.
Yeah, at 9:44 a.m., a second 88mm flak shell finds them.
You're kidding.
Direct hit on engine number 2. It explodes and immediately seizes up. So let's review the situation. They are missing the entire nose. They are flying by hand-pulled wires from the bomb bay. And now they were down to 3 engines.
And because of that gaping hole in the front of the plane?
The aerodynamic drag is just off the charts. It's exactly like driving a car on the highway with a massive parachute deployed out the back.
That open fuselage is just scooping up all the air.
It acts as a massive aerodynamic brake. So with one engine totally dead and that huge drag penalty from the missing nose, The Mispa simply can't maintain speed. They start falling behind the main group.
And falling out of a bomber formation is really bad news.
It's usually a death sentence. The formation provides what they called herd immunity, a massive overlapping grid of 50 caliber machine gun fire that keeps the German fighters at bay.
Right. If you're alone, you're an easy target.
A sitting duck. So they drop out of formation, sinking from 30,000 feet down to 26,000. They are losing altitude steadily. They are burning fuel at a massive rate, just trying to stay airborne. And remember, they have no fuel gauges to even see how much gas is left in the tanks.
Because the gauges were on the dashboard. It's just a ticking clock.
A ticking clock, and then the structural failure starts. The tail gunner, Staff Sergeant Charles Tucker, he calls out, well, he can't call out on the radio, but he notices something terrifying. The whole tail section is wobbling.
Oh, man. The stress of the explosion.
The blast, combined with the erratic, jerky flight path, hauling on those cables manually, it has caused stress fractures in the airframe. The entire tail is flexing back and forth.
And if that tail snaps off, the plane tumbles. The centrifugal force pins everyone inside, and nobody gets out.
Exactly. So they have to make a choice right then and there. They cannot stay in that airplane.
Right. The plane is dying around them. So the crew in the back, Gamenzi, Semelli, Bell, Tucker, they do the math. They see the tail shaking. They feel the altitude dropping. They decide they have to bail out.
Which is the logical choice. But think about the mechanical tragedy of this moment. In order to jump, they have to let go of the cables.
Oh, wow. Wow. I didn't even think about that.
As they line up at the waist window to put on their chutes and jump, there are fewer and fewer hands pulling on those wires. The human autopilot literally starts to fall apart as men leave the bomb bay.
So the plane immediately gets unstable again.
Instantly, it starts wallowing, pitching up and down, rolling.
It must have been terrifying for Swanson up front. He's sitting on the edge of nothing, and he can feel the flight controls just slipping away from him.
And he can't do a thing to stop it. He's up there fighting the throttles, trying to compensate with engine power. Finally, the guys in the back are gone. Bell, Kelly, Semelli, Gamenzi, Tucker, they've all jumped.
So who's left?
It is just Swanson and his co-pilot, Paul Berndt, sitting next to him in the open cockpit.
And they can't even speak to each other.
No words at all. The wind is way too loud. It's deafening. The source material describes this incredible silent exchange between the two men. Swanson just looks over at Berndt. And the look says it all. Go! Get out of here.
Because Burns is basically just a passenger at that point anyway.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a yoke on his side either.
Right. His controls went out the window, too. So Berndt unbuckles his harness, climbs back into the bomb bay, and jumps. And now, First Lieutenant Evald Swanson is the only human being left on board the Mispa.
He is totally alone. At what, 19,000 feet?
19,000 feet. In a plane that is essentially a flying brick at this point, it actively wants to crash.
So why does he stay? I mean, everyone else is out. The plane is boomed. Why not just follow Bert right out the bomb bay?
This is the part of the source material that really gets to me. It's about the sheer burden of command. Swanson sits there and does a mental calculation. He estimates they have crossed the border into Yugoslavia, but he knows that if he lets go of the throttles and lets the plane crash right this second, it's going to come down in the exact same geographical area as his crew's parachutes.
Oh, I see. It acts as a marker.
Exactly. A burning 30-ton bomber crashing into the woods is a giant signal flare for the German army. It draws patrols right to the landing zone of his men.
So he decides to keep flying it.
He decides to stay with the plane for 2 extra minutes.
Wow.
He wants to muscle it further away to put as much geographical distance between the flaming crash site and his crew as possible. He is deliberately acting as a decoy.
He is risking his own life, sitting in an open cockpit of a plane that's breaking apart, just to buy his crew a head start on the ground.
He sits there, wrestling this broken machine, watching the ground get closer because he has no altimeter to tell him his height. He holds it together until exactly 10:00 a.m.
And getting out of a heavy bomber that's entering a death spiral isn't exactly easy.
It's nearly impossible. Yeah. The second he lets go of the throttles to unbuckle his harness, the Mispa rolls hard to the left and goes into a steep dive.
The G-forces must have been insane.
They slam him right down into the seat. He has to fight with every ounce of his strength just to stand up. He has to climb back through the bomb bay, the same spot where his friends were holding those bare wires just minutes ago, and drag himself to the waist window.
He jumps at, what, 17,000 feet?
Roughly 17,000, yeah. And he cut it incredibly close. As he's drifting down in his parachute, he looks down and watches his plane. At about 15,000 feet, the stress is finally too much. The tail completely rips off.
Just snaps right off.
The fuselage plummets straight down and explodes on impact. If he had hesitated for even 30 more seconds up in that cockpit, he would have been trapped inside that explosion.
So he survives the bailout,
Yeah.
but he still has to hit the ground. And a parachute landing in 1944 isn't a soft one.
Not at all. He drifts down into a really dense forest in Yugoslavia. He crashes right through the canopy and hits a thick tree trunk. Hard.
Oh, man.
He breaks his left leg clean through, right between the knee and the ankle.
That is brutal.
And he doesn't even hit the ground. His parachute canopy gets completely snagged in the upper branches, so he is hanging 15 feet in the air, dangling by his harness with a snapped leg, entirely alone in enemy territory.
I guess that's how the German Wehrmacht finds him.
That is exactly how they find him. And I want to pause on this detail from the sources because I think it's an important piece of historical context.
Sure.
We often have this very black and white view of the war, but reality on the ground is sometimes more nuanced. The German soldiers find him, they get him down out of the tree. And the German medic who treats him, he treats Swanson completely professionally.
Really? No retaliation.
The source material explicitly notes this. The medic gives him morphine for the pain right away. He splints the broken leg correctly. Later on, a German military doctor actually sets the bone properly and puts it in a cast.
That's fascinating. I mean, Swanson is an enemy combatant who literally just dropped 2 tons of explosives on their supply lines.
Right. But the medical code held up in that specific instance. They treated him like a wounded soldier, not a criminal. They did their jobs impartially.
It's always interesting to see those flashes of humanity on the ground level amidst all the destruction. So Swanson is treated, but he is now officially a prisoner of war. Does he ever find out what happened to his crew?
He does. And this is the rare piece of good news in this story. All 8 of the men who bailed out before him, they all survived the jump.
Oh, credible.
They were all captured, processed by the Germans, and eventually they ended up reunited at a POW camp called Stalag Luft 4.
I've read a bit about Stalag Luft 4. That was not exactly a comfortable place to sit out the war.
Far from it. We need to really understand what this psychological transition was like for these guys. One minute you are a pilot, you're an officer, you have agency. The next minute you are just a number in a freezing camp. Stalag Luft 4 was notorious for its terrible conditions. It was severely overcrowded, bitter cold. The daily diet was mostly turnip soup and bread that was cut with sawdust.
And they were involved in the Black March too, right? Towards the end.
Yes. In early 1945, as the Russian army was advancing from the east, the Germans evacuated the camp and forced these starving POWs to march hundreds of miles in blizzard conditions. It was absolutely brutal.
So Swanson and his crew went from fighting gravity and aerodynamics to fighting starvation, frostbite, and typhus.
Exactly. But the key takeaway from the sources is that they were together. They shared that immense trauma, sure, but they also shared the completely unique victory of having kept that unflyable plane in the air. That bonded them.
And they made it through the camps. They survived the march.
They did. On April 30th, 1945, American tanks finally rolled through and they were liberated.
It's just amazing to think about the aftermath of a day like that. Swanson goes back home to Michigan after the war. He gets married. He lives a totally normal, quiet life until he passes away in 2009.
And you know what? He never bragged about it. He never considered himself a hero. In the interviews he gave much later in life, he just referred to himself as lucky.
Lucky. The guy loses the entire front of his plane, flies it by the throttles, breaks his leg in a tree, and goes to a POW camp. And he calls it lucky.
That's the sheer humility of that generation, isn't it? But you have to think about the bond that specific crews shared. The source material mentions they stayed incredibly close for the rest of their lives.
I bet.
They had reunions, they wrote letters to each other constantly. Because really, how do you explain that experience to anyone else at a neighborhood barbecue?
Right. So what did you do in the war, Evald? Oh, I held a 30-ton bomber together with my bare hands while my buddies pulled steel wires like a puppet from a freezing bomb bay.
Exactly. It sounds like a total tall tale. But for those 8 men, it was the defining 10 minutes of their entire lives.
And as we wrap up, we shouldn't forget Dudley and Henderson.
Never. The bombardier and the navigator, there were 2 empty seats at every one of those reunions. Their sudden loss was the horrific catalyst for everything that followed.
It really makes you think about the whole concept of redundancy. Today we talk about redundant systems in engineering all the time. Backup computers, backup generators, triple fail-safe software.
But in an analog machine in 1944, the ultimate redundancy was the human being.
Right. That's the real aha moment for me from this deep dive. Modern planes are engineering marvels. But if a modern fly-by-wire system somehow loses its nose today, the computer probably just throws a critical error. The logic fails, and the plane protects itself by shutting down.
Exactly. A modern jet is almost too smart to fly without its sensors. The B-17 was dumb enough, or rather mechanical enough, that it allowed desperate humans to literally hack the system midair.
Yeah.
It allowed raw muscle to replace severed hydraulics. It was a machine that could, in extreme circumstances, be kept aloft by sheer human willpower and grip strength.
Raw human muscle substituting for severed steel cables. That is an image I am not going to forget anytime soon.
It's the ultimate historical case study in adaptation. When the dashboard disappears, you don't just freeze and accept it. You crawl to the back and you find the wires.
That is a very powerful thought to leave on. I want you to ask yourself, when your own instrument panel vanishes, whether that's a crisis in your life, your work, your family, do you panic and go into a tailspin? Or do you head to the back and grab the cables? Because Evald Swanson and his crew grabbed the cables.
They sure did.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you on the next one.